steel and gears. It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello. Welcome to the Carousel Podcast. I have with me today an absolutely mega guest, Professor Alexander Gudugin. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, I have been a fan of yours for a long time. I loved Fourth Political Theory when it came out. It was hard to get in America for a little while. I think they made it easier, but I absolutely loved it. A huge fan of everything you said in here. And now you have a new book called The Trump Revolution, which is all about Trump and multipolarity and this new world that we find ourselves in. So the first thing I want to ask you is about globalism. So globalism lives loudly in this book. I don't know if you or Alex Jones started using that word first, but it's obviously a big Alex Jones word. I don't know where the etymology of the word globalism came. But you track the lineage of this concept of globalism from Hayek to Karl Popper to Soros. And so I just kind of want to ask, what is the lineage of globalism and what is the concept of globalism as different from globalization, say?
So, in fact, originally, I have found this concept in the late 80s in French language. They used the word mondialism. It was something like globalism. So mondialism or the same globalism. So that was used. This term was used to describe something like liberalism in the international relations. So a kind of ideology based on the concept of the universal value of individualism, of free markets, of representative democracy, of human rights ideology as a context, or rather a doctrine, teaching, philosophy projected worldwide. So that was, there are many levels in that concept. First of all, Western liberalism as the kind of essence of the Western history, Western philosophy. So liberalism was considered as the summary, kind of the logical result, the absolute metaphysical consequence of the progress of the Western modern civilization that has achieved its final phase. So individualism, market economy, liberal democracy, destruction of the nation states. So creation of one world with the same features, with the same ideology, with the same habits, the same modes, the same values, transnational, without borders. So everybody is considered not the citizen, but human. So any human being is already implicitly and explicitly citizen of some entity. So there was the global mixture, melting pot of humanity with promotion of the world government. And that was not a conspiracy theory. That was just the part of the manual of international relations and the section liberalism and international relations. So that was as well some ideology based on the main important classical liberal authors and philosophers, Hayek, Popper, that radically rejected any common points with either socialism or social democracy, with something left, and as well with anything from the right, with nationalism, patriotism, traditional values. So that was a kind of middle way. So middle way between left and right. And that was ideology promoted by the modernity and postmodernity of the West. And the West, after all, above all, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, became more and more liberal. So before, it was divided between some right, some left groups, parties, movements. But after some moment, there was only liberalism. So liberalism became some unique, the only acceptable ideology, and everything that challenged that was considered illiberal. And illiberal, that means fascist and something unacceptable. So liberalism, in its globalist moment, became a kind of totalitarian ideology. That is more or less globalism. Alex Jones, for decades as well, uses this word. I don't know where he himself has found it. So, but in my my life, I have discovered this concept, not just the word, but concept in French. In the French political culture, where this term had most of all negative, pejorative meaning. So I have read mostly the books of the enemies of the globalism or mondialism, mondialism, and that has influenced myself a bit, because I have in that phenomenon, political, ideological, geopolitical, technological, economical, as a kind of ideology of Antichrist. So the worst thing that could happen with the world if this thing would gain. And it became the reality, because I have discovered this concept before the fall of Soviet Union, and my idea was to replace communist doctrine, materialism, atheism by some return to traditional values, to Russian political ideals and concepts and theories. But that was quite opposite, and liberalism and globalism has won in my country, in Russia, in 90s. So I have passed in my life this period of 90s being put in the system I hated. So and I hated that in Russia, I hated that outside of Russia, including that comparing with some experience of Soviet socialism, Russian socialism, I came to the conclusion, maybe not to natural for myself, that the Soviet socialism was somehow better, somehow paradoxically better than this liberalism and globalism. I was very anti-communist in my youth. But when I have discovered the globalism, I came to the conclusion that in the world there are the much worse things than Soviet socialism that I hated.
Yeah, I like in your book when you say, and I want to talk about this in a minute, that multipolarity is always concerned with traditional values, wherever those may be. And I think that that's a great concept and very much where we should head. But before that, so you have these different groups. You draw a connection. You say that there's the deep state and there's the globalist, but they're not the same. These are different groups, at least I think, if I'm understanding you correctly. And then, of course, you have the elites. So you have the elites, you have the deep state, and then you have the globalists. And Trump is sort of none of those things, right? So what are these different groups? Who are the globalists versus who are the deep state versus the elites?
So, first of all, elites existed always as kind of ruling class. Right. And they existed in the theocracy and the democracy and the totalitarian systems, in communism, in fascism and liberalism and all kind of monarchy. So elite is a sociological concept of those who rule, and the masses those who are ruled. So that is a kind of neutral term, I would say.
Yeah.
So
okay. Got it.
That is sociological. Just remark that there is two groups of in any kind of society, and for example, there are explicit recognition of elites and implicit elites. Democracy, liberalism, and communism as well. They try to convince us that there is no more elites, but they are. So in communism as well as in liberalism, so there is a bit not so explicit element. So, but they always exist, always, and very interesting that there was the fear of the revolt of the masses in Ortega y Gasset in the beginning of the 20th century, and there was the other concern about the revolt of the elites. Precisely, that was the name of the book of American sociologist Christopher Lasch, The Revolt of Elites. Very interesting. Because he affirmed there in his book that we were afraid that masses without culture, without knowledge, without aesthetic feeling, they could destroy and cut the roots to our traditions. But there were in the reality elites who the new elites, liberal elites, who has done that. So the elites has accomplished the task of the masses, presumably, and they have destroyed our identity and perverted all the values. Very, very pertinent remark of Christopher Lasch. But that is elite. So next point, deep state. So deep state, in my opinion, it is unelected body of administrators and bureaucrats that they don't who don't change when there is a change of the ruling party. For example, they stay at their post, and they presumably should not have any ideology. They should follow national interests and adjust themselves to the Democrats, to the Republicans when they come to power. But in the case of the first term of Trump, it happened that deep state is not that the deep state didn't change, didn't adjust its agenda to Trump's demands. So they continued to follow liberal Democrats' agenda against Trump. So these unelected bureaucrats, they have manifested themselves as ideological body. So that is new meaning of deep state. So that deep state and what you call now activist judges or legacy media. So deep state is like that. They should be normally neutral or bipartisan, but they are not. They just are totally in favor of one part of American political spectrum, the liberal globalist precisely part. So that was new discovery, very recent discovery, and deep states from the conspiracy theory migrated to the center of political discourse and narrative on both sides. So that is interesting. So I think that globalism, as I have explained already, globalism is just ideology of something like Fukuyama's concept of the end of the history. So the victory of the global liberalism and universalization of the progressive liberal values and imposing them on all the humanity without borders, with some ecological and woke and DEI concerns, cancel culture, network, exactly the same pattern of behavior to all the people. And that is project. So how these three things relate to each other? I think that elites, the majority of the elites of the liberal world, they share today globalism. We could call them globalist elite, and they form precisely not only in the United States, but as well in the EU, in European Union, as well some bureaucratic body and courts and judges as well. So that is this third branch of democracy, who, as well, that should be neutral and balancing executive and legislative power. But in the reality, they are promoting only one ideological agenda. And if, for example, these globalists, they find someone not fitting to their plans, so they, thanks to this activists or corrupted judges, they stop that. As we see now in Romania, in France today, when Marine Le Pen, most popular politician in France, was arrested by totally awkward, totally laughable reason. So that is how deep state works. Ideology of deep state, in that sense, is globalism, and liberal elites share this attitude. At the same time, we could say there is the other part of elite, smaller, much smaller, but now this smaller, not liberal, anti-deep state elite is in power in the United States. Trump
this is Musk. Yeah, Musk and Trump, and
Musk, Trump, and others.
Yeah.
So something. So we could imagine, and there is, in the reality, this part of not globalist elite in the confrontation, in opposition to deep state. That is very interesting. And thanks to this Trumpism, thanks to MAGA, we could clearly see that. So that is that is something very, very, very concrete. It's not just hypothesis. It is not just a kind of theory. This kind of globalism, of deep state, or liberal elite, they are acting factor. So we see them in the Tesla-phobic protests. We see them in the legacy media that lie. In there, not just lie. It is lie, okay, but that is ideologically motivated. So maybe these legacy media are totally corrupted, maybe not. Maybe they just believe in what they in the image of the reality they promote. So that is about deeper level of corruption, not just for money, but maybe for some totally wrong and perverted ideals or values, anti-traditional, anti-human. So that is much more evil, I think, than and worse than just corrupted journalists or judges. Their soul is corrupted.
So it raises the question, that's very well described, and I'm right following you, but it raises the question, how did the globalists capture the deep state?
I think that's a very interesting question. I've tried to elaborate that in my book, in this book you have shown,
Yep.
Trump's Revolution. I tried to follow that. I have come to conclusion that during last decades, starting from 80s, there was a kind of confirmation that globalist agenda is in progress. So there were so many signs that globalists left as in CFR or right as neocons, both right and left globalists, they were generally right about predicting and explaining the reality. After the end of the Cold War, there was not just new ideology that has emerged, but one pole has disappeared, but the other pole, liberal, capitalist, Western, was there. And there was expansion.
The other pole was Russia. I just want people to understand. The other pole was Russia, obviously, that you're talking about. And then so we're talking about the phase right after that. Right?
Yes. Russia. The end of the Soviet Union. That was the end of the pole. One of the two pole in the Cold War and bipolar world, and the fall and collapse of the Soviet Union has left only this existing Western liberal pole alone, and there was a kind of confirmation that the West has won over the East. Capitalism has won socialism, liberalism has won illiberalism, and expansion of NATO was a kind of expansion not only in the space, but that was as well and the parallel the expansion of this liberal Western ideology. There was no anymore the necessity to adjust to some socialist leftist challenge. So the West, the liberal West, was free, totally free to affirm itself, and this ideological agenda that was just part of the international politics in United States and in Europe became a kind of dogma, became a kind of the idea that has overcome, that has won, and has defeated the alternative ideological socialist communist camp. So China has accepted that. So everybody was quite fair, seemed to be quite fair, and during these decades, deep state, just American bureaucrats with no ideology, they have accepted that finally this globalist right and left were right. So their ideology was not just one of the element of the form of the West, but they were right. So there is ongoing process of the globalization as the only meaning of the political and economical history, and that was a kind of process of ideologization of the deep state. So and that was very, very clearly seen during George W. Bush Jr. There was neocons, for Republicans, right globalists, they didn't change anything in American
Yeah.
politics.
Yeah,
And
particularly foreign policy, right? It was the exact
well,
same
that's
foreign policy.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that was the consensus of the right and left globalists has convinced deep state, American deep state, that should be neutral ideologically, that you should accept this way and don't try anything else outside. And the coming to power of Trump and the first term, that was huge short circuit this agenda. So there was a kind of backlash of the society of traditional values inside of the United States. And that was the first serious test to this. But I think deep state has decided, oh, that was just casual, something that was just episode, so populist episode that didn't change the balance. But everything is now totally different, because second coming of Trump shows that there is no more accident. It is not accident. That is essence. Essence, the logic of the history is not so straight. It's not so easy. It's not so transparent. So more and more globalization, more and more woke, more and more transgenders, LGBT, and everything will be quite right. More and more illegal immigrants, more and more crimes and drugs and violence of the migrants, and there will be a kind of end of the history, as Fukuyama suggested. So something went wrong in this narrative, and the second comment of Trump was the end of this confidence, and there was end of this phase, absolute faith of deep state in the irreversibility of the left liberal globalist agendas. So I think there was the kind of split in deep state, and I have found in Peter Thiel a very interesting concept that liberalism is just obstacle to the technological progress. You can put it that way. It's if you like that. I'm not a fan of the technological progress, but I think that was the line of thought of some tycoons from Silicon Valley to support Trumpism. Elon Musk is one of the example. Vivek Ramaswamy, the other. Anderson, the third, and including Zuckerberg or other that or Bezos, who have finally joined the camp.
Switched, yeah, they finally
switched, exactly.
Yeah. Well, no, in your book, you talk about this phase from that you're sort of saying the rise of this globalist dogma occurred during this end of history phase. You say it's Sakalum cycle theory with Strauss-Howe, and it's like these different phases, and we're at the end of this 4-part phase. That's kind of which started during the Greatest Generation, started in the 40s and 50s, and now we were at this kind of end phase where everything's kind of falling apart and degenerating, and that it has been this past 25 years or so, which is 30 years, which is the end of history phase, according to Fukuyama. And now with the second Trump election, we've reached the end of that phase. Because you're right, this power structure that did become sort of dogmatically insane, right, realized, okay, we've lost. Because Trump, it wasn't just a one-time thing. He's now gotten elected twice. We can't avoid this anymore. So there are elites and there's members of the deep state that are sort of switching and saying, all right, well, we can't ignore this anymore. We have to now enter the beginning of a new phase, which you call high. Right, the high phase is the beginning of the news cycle. So, I think also interestingly, during that time of the end of history phase, you're talking about demographically inside the deep state, internationally, you have the rise of women. Like probably at the beginning of that phase, there's almost no women in these managerial deep state positions, and then by the end of it, it's almost all. So there's also kind of an interesting, maybe that has to do with the dogma. I don't know if you thought about that at all, but yeah. So anyway, now that we're in this new high phase, and now that we have Trump, that is this new era of Trumpism, which is what the book is all about, the Trump Revolution. What are we going to see? More multipolarity, but why?
So multipolarity, it is a kind of alternative structure of international affairs after the collapse of the unipolarity of end of history of liberalism, of globalism. So globalism affirmed. So first of all, I think that the theory of Strauss-Howe regards, first of all, United States, not so much international relations, but that is inner cycles in your American history. And very interesting that if you accept that, so the end of the fourth turning, the end of this cycle is precisely the last 25 years, and the end of it, according to these two authors, Strauss-Howe, is precisely 2025 where we are when Trump came to power. So that is very symbolic, and I think, and that was the end of the crisis, represented by a rule of globalists, the last fourth turning at the end of the crisis, and beginning of the high, the next. The next cycle with totally different values. So interesting that in this theory of cycles of American history, there is not a continuation. So, for example, between a fourth turning of the one cycle and the first turning of the next cycle, there is absolute opposition. So there was decay, there is creation, there was destruction, there is construction, there was some perversion, there is norms and normal values. So totally different, and that is revolutionary change. It is not just evolution. That is precisely the next cycle is revolution. That is why I've called my book on Trump's revolution.
Right.
Revolution, high.
That
is totally, for example, not just adaptation of or improvement.
It's a turning. It's a total. Whereas the previous four turnings are basically an evolution. This is a revolution because it's the beginning, right? Yeah.
And after that comes the other evolution, but of this high, of this first turning of the next cycle. So everything that will follow will be continuation, maybe on decline as well, of this foundational phase. So Trump is more than Trump. So Trumpism and some mega phenomenon is more than you see that. If you accept this very interesting, very pertinent doctrine or theory of Strauss-Howe concerning multipolarity or great powers world order is the next step. It is not return to the nation states. That is very important. It is not just return to the nationalism, to the nation states and their rivalry, their competition, their wars or peace. So there is not Westphalian system. Multipolarity, it is a new phenomenon that existed before beginning of the colonial era. So because before the Columbus, there was the Western civilization, there was Chinese civilization, Islamic civilization, Russian Orthodox Christian civilization, African civilization, American pre-European civilization. So something where Indian civilization, and they coexisted, encountering each other with the context, with some conflicts, but not necessary clashes. So there was a kind of period of coexistence of such civilizations or civilizational states. Now it is the return to the same pattern, but on the next level. So that was pre-colonial time, that is post-colonial time. So decolonization and the westernization of the world, and Huntington was right in essence. So that means restoration of this ancient foundation and principle of these civilizations. There is not only one modern, Western, liberal, postmodern, globalist civilization. There are few of them. There is Chinese civilization, the Pole, civilizational state, not just civilization and not just the state, but both. Russian civilizational state is growing, rising. India civilizational state. In the future, we could presume Islamic civilizational state after some changes inside of Islamic politics. African, Latin American. So something, and Trump fits excellently with his idea to annex Canada or Greenland in this concept. So Trump is going to create the greater America, a kind of civilizational state that would include the other territories already under more or less under geopolitical control of United States. So and in a proper boundaries. For example, if Trump would like to annex Western Europe, it would be too much and too difficult, and maybe the toxic European Union could intoxicate as well American society. In some aspect, Europe is much more degenerated and in more deeper decline than the United States, so that it could be dangerous. But the idea to create the pole, accepting the other poles, the great civilizational state, greater United States of America, fits excellently in this multipolar vision and great powers world order.
Yeah, so it's like the difference between, I just want to clarify for people listening, the difference between, and you do a great job laying this out in the book, the difference between a globalist American empire and a multipolar American empire is the multipolar American empire under Trump might take Greenland, which feels imperial, but in fact, that's the end of the border of the empire. After that, we're not trying to get you to participate. You can participate or not. You can come in or not. If you don't want to, fine, go do your own thing. But we're not going to try and come in and, trans your kids with USAID and, make you unstable because you're not playing in our unipolar total globe world. Whereas the past regime was like, okay, we're not going to take any land, but if you don't cooperate, we're going to come and make it your problem that you're not cooperating, right?
Something like that. But as well, we could put that a bit differently. So in multipolarity, in the context of great powers world order, America is America. It could be greater, it could be expanding, but still in some logical civilizational boundaries and the front and the limits that are natural for American identity, and two symbolic facts play a very important role here: creation of the wall in the south, and idea to annex the territory to the north. So that is attracted to north, where there is the space to fill, and putting the barrier against different civilization. Latin America, maybe that is very nice, but it is still different and very strong Catholic Latin identity. That is, and that could represent a kind of danger to WASP identity or North American identity, including the other ethnic groups. But there are some challenges demographic in the identity that America could not overcome, could not assimilate. That is the real threat, and the reaction on one hand against this threat of the overcoming of the other civilization from the south, and there is the wall project, and the opening space to the north, that is an annexation of Canada and Greenland project. So that all that is inscribed in the correct, realistic, imperial, but not imperialistic, imperial concept. So you are going to create a great America, but you respect some civilizational orders. Canada in, Greenland in, but Mexico out. If you would try to annex Mexico, for example, that would too much, and that will create inner contradiction. So if you want to affirm yourself as the special civilizational state, you should respect some natural borders. So that is important. And globalist concept, it is sacrifice United States as national state, as identity, to destroy any kind of identity, to get more illegal migrants, and at the same time to try to topple all the regimes with color revolutions through the world that could represent obstacle to the promotion of the globalist agenda. They're totally different. I see these two projects. They have nothing to do with empire. Trump's idea could be regarded as empire, but this globalism, it is against any kind of legitimate political structures. It exposes itself as the liquidation, the deconstruction of any political structures, and replacing them by networks. But NGO and other USA ID was in the center of that. And that was the part of deep state. And that worked not for the interests of United States of America, but against this interest. That is why it is now closed or almost closed. So I think that is not, that there is nothing casual in that and all that. So I think that Trump wants to implement the correct and very coherent geopolitical and global agenda, and he affirms we are going to be great again, and Europe, if you want to be on the level of our movement, please be great again, mega proposed by Elon Musk. Make Europe great again. That means stop with liberalism and please create European empire with its sovereign structure, with its interests, with its normal political system, and stop being destructive, stop being liberal, stop being toxic. The same proposal to Russia, to China as well. China doesn't need this advice, because China does everything it could to become great again. So that is there is no doubts that China from some time already is following precisely that way.
Yeah, China's been doing make China great again for a long time. So we have a super chat. I don't know if you know what these super chats are. This is like somebody pays to ask this a question. This is how the live stream works. So I want to ask this, and then I want to ask one critical question based on what you just said. But I got to get this in because people pay. So what's your outlook for the national? This is from Robert Wiesenfeld. What's your outlook for the nationalist populist countries, USA, Hungary, Russia, Israel, versus the hopeless globalist ones, Sweden, UK, Canada, Ireland?
So I think there is an interesting process. We called some time ago the West, we Russians, collective West. So there was only one West, globalist West, liberal West, and with Trump, we see now the split. There is no more collective West, unique collective West. There are two Wests. There is American West, and there is European West. But after this first split, we see now the second split. There is Europe, already in Europe. In Europe, there is identitarian, oriented on the traditional value countries, and there are still globalists, as you had before Trump came in your country, in the United States. So the Europe is going the same way. There is this split. So elite and the European deep state still is in the hands of the liberals and globalists and populists, but there are the growing power and rising power of European populist movement, mostly right, but as well some of them are left. In some countries, they are already have power in Hungary, in Slovakia, in Serbia, somehow in Italy as well. But there is the majority of European countries are still under control of this European deep state globalists and liberal elites. So, but the split is already there. This second split. So I think this second split is very interesting because I think that the shift to the multipolarity is unstoppable. So that will be more and more clearly seen, not only in the United States, it is the fact already, but something like that will follow in European Union. But at the same time, we see how radical, how violent is the resistance against Trump in United States. These violent acts against Tesla, against this sabotage of the judges and legacy media, trying to undermine everything Trump tries to do. The same fight is now in Europe. So there are globalists who don't want to lose their grip over their society, grip of the West. They Soros, for example, maybe Rothschilds, maybe the other persons. They are in the shadow. We don't know their name, but we see how they act. We see what they do. We know their ideas. We know better and better their tools, their scenario. So we could identify how this mission of globalism works. But the real identities of those who are behind the curtains, we still don't know. So we call that Soros. Maybe he is just the puppet, just the doll.
Well, and you referred to what just happened in Romania as an example. They canceled the elections. This is an example of the fighting back at any means necessary. Also in the book, you kind of predict the assassination attempt before it happens. You said they're going to do anything, including assassination, which, who knows what the real story of that is, or if we'll ever get it. So the critique that I hear of multipolarity in my little world is that it's third worldist. So I don't know if you've heard this term, third worldist. And I think the critique that people give is, well, okay, inevitably the certain poles are not going to be able to hold their own. Right, like say the African pole, the Latin American pole, maybe there's a Southeast Asian pole one day, these poles are not going to be able to prop themselves up. So what then happens? Because then somebody's going to get in there, China, and exactly what they're doing in Africa now, and they're going to take that pole, kind of, right? So do you have a response to that?
So I think that I have remarked, observed in my recent talks with some American experts and specialists in international relations. First of all, with John Mearsheimer and many other very excellent thinkers. I have remarked there is two attitudes in that sense. In my opinion, multipolarity should be very sincere and should be somehow humanistic. So we need to grant to all civilizations that the civilizations were under Western radical pressure, under colonization. So we need to help to them to restore their civilizational sovereignty. That is a kind of moral duty. So in that sense, theory of multipolar world and the concept of BRICS uniting these civilizations on the level of the first institutional approach, it is a kind of maybe third worldism. So the idea is to help to Africa, to Latin America, to Islamic world to find their sovereignty, to restore their dignity, to defend their values, including in the case when these values contradict our own. So that is a kind of the way of not egoistic. That is much more humanitarian, I would say.
And it's a moral imperative.
Moral, yes,
yeah,
moral.
Yeah, it's a moral imperative.
That is theory of multipolar world. But I have a remark that, for example, in the eyes of John Mearsheimer, there is no place for such humanitarian concern. He considered only great power. Great powers. He sees that there is American great power, there is Chinese great power, there is on the third level Russian great power, but India already is not that. That is third one. So, and in that, I'm not cynical, but realist approach. If the other poles don't form themselves, so these territories will be used by existing great power. They just will impose their control. So that is very realist, I would say. So very cold. If you could not, for example, Islamic world has shown its the great weakness confronting with Israel. So many talks about how great Islam world is, and in the reality check, confronting with Israel, everybody except Houthi of Yemen, they failed. They miserably failed. So, and if you cannot afford some common action against common enemy, so you are losing in the reality the claim to be civilization state. Or Erdogan, who has used our this time our weakness in Syria, he has invaded or helped to invade Syria, and now he is under backlash, and nobody will come to help him, neither us nor Iran, because we feel betrayed by him. So that is the kind of very small scale, narrow-minded politics that doesn't let to Islamic pole to form some real power in the context of realist global great power powers world order approach, that is quite good. So they are too timid, too stupid maybe to organize themselves as a real power and let us use their weakness. So that is realist approach. So nothing personal, just realism and international relations, but in the case not of any sovereign country, but only concerning the really great powers. And I think there is no confrontation or direct opposition between these two world vision. They coincide in the main aspect. So we see existing great powers already existing. It is not just our dreams, but we could presume appearance and manifestation of other Southern Asian, African, Islamic, Latin American great power. Some of us, we Russians, we would support that, and I think that much more practical and realist Americans wouldn't mind if it happens, but will not help them as some moral duty, just regard as the things will develop. So there are two. I would say the difference is not in the understanding of the reality of what is going on in the world, but just two reaction. One much more third worldist, but in this time much more moral or ethical, humanistical, and less humanistical, more based on the calculation. And globalism is something completely different from first and for the second. So there is the kind of idea to undermine global powers, to reduce them in pieces, to topple the strong leaders, to put on the top the weak and depending elites, as you have said, female elites or deplorable people, broken people as morally and physically as Macron, so perverts. They need perverts because they could be easily manipulated, and with the help of these perverts, they could manage. They dream they could manage the humanity. That is opposition to multipolarity and to great powers.
Well, right. It's at least in the multipolar system, people have a chance. You know, it's in the globalist system, they have no chance. So it's like it's a worse question. All right, do you have time for one more?
Yes.
One more question? Okay. I got one more for you, and then I know you got to go. But this is the cultural question, because this is ostensibly a cultural podcast. You talked about Trump's culture, and you say that Trump has a personal style, but he doesn't really have a personal cultural style yet that has spread beyond postmodernism. You have a great chapter in here about postmodernism and how Trumpism is fundamentally against postmodernism. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about why is Trumpism, what do you mean by Trumpism being against postmodernism? And then what do you see happening aesthetically or culturally with the Trump movement?
So first of all, I think there is article, the chapter in the book where I've tried, on the contrary, to explore the Lacanian element of in Trumpism, because I have remarked from the first term of Trump there was the very a kind of strange support of the atypical nonconformist circles, something like alt-right in the United States. They full of irony. So that was not just the square traditionalists promoting provinces and the life of the cowboys and so on, living in a small city with small engagements. But there was the kind of ironic tradition with meme culture, or people like Sam Hyde, and there was the kind of imagination used by early Trumpists, and that I think that was very very particular because before critical theory was only the tool of the liberals. So liberals appealed to the critical theories of any kind in order to mock the other, to laugh.
Irony, and
Absolutely.
mocking. Yeah, right. It's the
Yes,
Seinfeld era,
but
right?
now
Yeah.
it's totally opposite.
It's reversed. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it was reversed. So this time, alt-right and other people started to ironically expose the liberals. So liberals, before they were the right, they were government, and they were the kind of law and might, and they mock at them and laugh at them was the weight of liberation of the imagination. That was extreme. That was punk. That was ironically far right. Not really far right, I think, but that was the kind of mimetic far right. Nothing to do with real far right. Just to tease, to challenge the globalist, because when someone from liberal left heard something sounding as far right, they started to react in a very stupid way. That was the kind of mockery on them, and that, so there was a shade of postmodernity in that. But in general, I think the Trump tries to reverse the historical eras. So in the globalist understanding, there is only one-way passage from tradition to modernity, from modernity to postmodernity. And Trump now declares that the historical time, political time, is reversible. So you could return back to pre-postmodern liberalism, not left liberalism. So you can go the passage, the road from Hayek through Popper to Soros backward. So you could come to Popper, and after that to Hayek, and maybe further to no liberalism at all. So that everything is possible, quite possible. So I think that is the Trump is challenging the line of the time, of political ideological time. That it is why Fukuyama or globalists, Harari or Bernard Levy, they are so embarrassed by that, because in their understanding of the reality, the second coming of Trump could not happen. So if Trump has won, everything is totally lost, not politically, but ideologically. So there is a different time, there are the different values. So everything that was impossible now is possible. And actually, aesthetically, I think that Trump, one of the first decree signed by him on day one was the beauty of the American city. That was great. That was something Stalinist or Roman. Let us return to the classical style. Stop this avant-garde experiments. Stop this postmodernity postmodern thrash. Let us return the center to the buildings, to the squares. Stop these holes in the center. Let's return to the normality and to the beauty and to exquisite forms. So there is return to some classical values. It is not still yet happened. That has not still happened, but that is already planned, I think. So I think that Trump needs big philosophers, big intellectuals, and big artists now. That is absolutely necessary. Without that, he will fail. So it is not about economy only, about politics only.
It's culture.
If you are, yes, culture.
Yeah.
The revolution is culture. So Trump's conservative revolution demands some conservative revolutionary culture in Hollywood and the painting and the music. So that is the huge challenge. So I think that Trumpist MAGA should be very, very alert, very, very active, and to have energy in order to promoting. And this irony of previous Trumpism is not enough. So it served very well to overcome the enemy, but now it's time to create, to build, to give the form to the great ideas. So make art great again, and make American culture
well, or return it to beauty, right? I mean, I think like now we have Frank Gehry. Do you know who Frank Gehry is? The architect. He makes these squiggly, crazy buildings. And he would be ultimately postmodern. And I love what you're saying of running it back. So you're literally going back through time. And where do you land before modernity? And I might be wrong about this, but it's like Art Deco, right? I think you're like landing back at Art Deco architecturally, or is that modern? Architecture, Art Deco might be modern.
No, there is modernity. It is not modernism. Modernism is the art. It was totally different. That was reaction against Enlightenment. So Enlightenment is a problem. Enlightenment already had all the negative elements, and we see now the ultimate results of Enlightenment. So we need to revise Enlightenment, but the modernist art and modernist culture was a kind of reaction against modernity or enlightenment. So I like the concept of dark enlightenment. I don't share that at all, but the concept is right. So we need to revise enlightenment. Enlightenment was something very different than we presume it was. So we need to return maybe further in time. So why not to get to the traditional life?
So way back, way before. Yeah. So before, but wait, how was modernism a reaction to Enlightenment?
So modernism as style was much more attracted by myths, with symbols, with unconsciousness. That was no progress in the sense of the modernization, utilitarianism, the capitalism,
rationality, rationalism. Yeah.
Modernism and art was something against that, against materialism, much more about dreams and symbols. So it was called modernism, but in reality, modernity, it is the age after Enlightenment, this materialism, mechanical science. That was modernity, precisely. Democracy, liberalism, market. That was modernity. But modernism was something different.
Yeah, that's the aesthetic reaction in some ways to modernity. Fascinating. Yeah, those aesthetic ages are always so hard to wrap your mind around. But I think I love what you're saying about all this. And also, in your book, you have this great quote from Yuval Harari, who said, which I don't think enough people talk about this. He said, if Trump wins, it's the end of everything. And it's like Trump won. So what's Yuval Harari doing these days? Okay, thank you so much. This was really great. You're a hero of mine. So I really, really appreciate this, Professor Dugin. I mean, how can we promote you to Americans more? Obviously, get the book. It's not hard to get. It comes in the mail very easily. Follow you. You have you made a great tweet the other day that was very online and on. It was about it was talking about. I retweeted it. I can't remember, but it was about. What is her name? She's like the international super globalist American woman who's in charge. She's been in charge of foreign policy forever You were
Nuland.
making, yeah, Newland. Yeah, it was about Victoria Newland. It was hilarious. Really good tweet. So yeah, we got to get more people following you and stuff. So yeah, I'll anything else you want to say or promote?
So I think that we need to now the legacy media, they start to pay more attention to the conservatism, to traditionalism, obviously, because now there is Trumpist revolution, and they pay more attention to us, to all the people who represent this conservative or fourth political theory alternative to the globalism. They pay more attention to liberalism, and they try to stigmatize ourselves. For example, I see someone ask why I gave the interview to CNN comparing Trump and Putin, because I like very much Trump and I like very much Putin. I think they have many, some not so many, but common points. I think they have both.
Yeah, he's saying, why are you comparing
Yes,
them?
yes, exactly,
So, yeah.
exactly. I'm responding now. So I think they are sharing both traditional values, defense of traditional values. So, but globalists, they oblige you to see Putin as an evil guy who is corrupted. So he's Soviet, he is he's imperialist, and so on. And that is wrong image. Don't believe in lies. So they try to do the same with Trump. They like the mainstream media try to describe Trump as superficial and emotionally unstable and not intellectual person. We need to overcome that. We need to, Americans and Russians and all the people in the world should liberate ourselves from these cliches, because they portrayed us, our leaders, ourselves, in the absolutely wrong way. Don't believe them. Believe what you hear. Believe, for example, the interview that really independent people make with us, either the mainstream or engaged. So, but there are serious people. So we need to discover the reality of United States of America, of Europe, of Islam, of China, not relying on the mass media paid by globalists, by USAID, by Soros, because there is manipulation. We should not be afraid to like Putin, to like Trump, to say what we think, to criticize what we hate, who we hate. So we need to be more free. So the freedom is on our side. So and I would wish to people not to be afraid in front of globalist media or some perversion of our ideas. So we should know ourselves. So XCOM is great platform to express what we think. We are the media proper, and there are so many beautiful journalists, so beautiful people: Candice Owens, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Judge Napolitano, so many people we could trust, and they have no fear in comparison between Putin and Trump. So in spite of the platform, so we need to use everything we could in order to promote our truths, our position, our beliefs. So don't be afraid. We are going to win.
Thank you. We have this funny phenomenon. I live in Pasadena, LA, and we have this funny phenomenon of, or even in my hometown in Chicago, just houses or in public art, just a Ukraine flag will pop up. And I always wonder, where did they get this? Like, why did they care? Like, where did they come to the conclusion that they need to be supporting Ukraine? Like, they didn't, 5 seconds ago, they didn't even know what Ukraine was. And now suddenly they have a flag on their house. And I'm always like, where does this come from? You know, like where do they get this from? It's such a weird phenomenon, you know, that Americans, so we have these Ukrainian flags. Why? Why are we flying it?
I think that they get them in the same place when they get drugs.
Probably. It is drugs. It's a certain type of drug. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was really great. And yeah, stay in touch. And I'll put the episode up on all the platforms. It'll be on Spotify and everything shortly.
Thank you. Best wishes.
Thank you. Bye. Oops.